Glover Teixeira has offered to step in to be the backup fighter for Adesanya Blachowicz. I love it. I love it. I think that that's a position that is underutilized. The whole reason that position ever became frowned upon is because Conor McGregor was offered to do that for Tony versus Khabib and said publicly, I am not a replacement fighter. Conor did nothing wrong. That is not my message. I'm sharing with you where the stigma ever came from in the first place, that wasn't a cool or coveted position. I totally disagree. I think that's a great position. I think it should be celebrated. I think a guy should get a media day to discuss being the backup position. It's a very fascinating spot. It is possibly the most interesting position in the sport. You have a guy whose dream may come true. Who knows? Big risk, big reward. He is taking a big risk. Whatever athlete that is takes a big risk. To use a recent example of Michael Chandler just going through that. But look at everything that Chandler agreed to do just for the outside chance that he gets an opportunity. Forget about the pandemic. Forget about that it's in a foreign country. Forget about it's his first time in an organization, which historically things don't go well your first time. They just don't go as well as could be. You might even win, but you just have one of these nights. That just wasn't the performance you wanted. Chandler says okay to all of it. Oh, by the way, should he step in at the absolute last second, it is for a polar opposite fight. I mean, Gaethje, who's going to stand up and bang with you, is polar opposite than Khabib trying to take you down. Chandler still says yes. I think that's fascinating. I would love to see him getting an interview. How are you preparing for this? How is camp going? I mean, you always get these generic and boring questions that put all of us to sleep at every single press conference, the same questions from the same guy to a different athlete. And it's like music. There's only so many notes. I'm not blaming the reporter that does that, but I think you would concede to me, we hear the same questions, right? Well, if you ask those questions to a guy who's got two things to juggle, I just think it's a more interesting story. I mean, from my perspective, it's more interesting. Conor made it uncool. And when Conor made it uncool, history was still on the side that it's a coveted spot. History was still on the side of the Kamaru Usmans who stepped in and did it, by example, who then go in to title fight opportunities. Volkov, who was the first guy ever brought to the scale, they didn't even tell anybody. They were doing a weigh-in one day, and Volkov shows up and gets on the scale. Everybody goes, "What's this all about?" And he kind of spills the beans to the media, and he goes, "Hey, the UFC called me and they flew me over. They paid me $10,000 just to get on the scale." I mean, he kind of spilled the beans that there's a participation and there's something cool about this, and maybe you do it, maybe you don't. Make it worth your time anyway. I'm just sharing with you, there's something about that spot, and now that I'm seeing Glover go after it actively, I think it's smart. I think it's very smart. I think any job in the world where you're the only guy to show up to the interview, it's going to become your job. Well, what is Dana going to do? Go, "Hey, Glover, I dislike you so much. I disapprove of all of the good works that you have had so much that I'm not even going to put you in a backup spot to a mythical fight that nobody else has even asked to do." No, Glover's the one taking the risk. Glover's the one that's going to go into a training camp. Glover's the one that doesn't know who his opponent's going to be. Glover's the one that's got to make weight, who's got to quarantine, who's got to do the medicals. Glover should be rewarded and recognized for that. I only bring it to you. I just thought it was a great move. That's a great move by Glover. In history, aside from the one comment that Conor McGregor made, history is on the side of being the backup fighter. It's a great spot. Michael Chandler has never fought in the UFC in his first match, what we believe to be an elimination title fight. Though that's never been stated, we as fans believe that the winner of Chandler Hooker is going to draw into the winner of Conor versus Dustin with the absence of Khabib, which is where we sit today. I'm just sharing with you that a large part of the Chandler story isn't just that he was a champion that came over from a different organization, so he's the new toy that gets a little bounce. That's not what it is. He took a risk. He got asked to do it. That's the only difference. This one, Glover is volunteering to do it, but Glover's the only one. We got to give it to him. We not only got to give it to him, we've got to recognize him. He deserves a bounce from this. He deserves a media tour. He deserves a good job from the fans. He deserves, hey, you got a lot of balls and you're not afraid to work hard and step in on the last minute. I mean, I think it shows a lot to do this. And by the way, there's no reason to make the organization do everything. There's no reason. Joe Silva used to love this. Instead of me, Joe Silva, having to sit around and figure out who's going to fight who and why, how about two guys bring it to me? Drop it in my lap. I want him. He wants me. We want to do it on this date. Here's why the fight makes sense. Cool. Thanks for doing my job for me. Next. I'm just sharing that with you. That I think that Glover has done everything right. I hope he gets that position. If he doesn't get the position, I'd love to hear the explanation as to why not. Congrats, Glover. I believe you just became the number one contender to contend for. A lot of words that are involved, but potentially world championship.